Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
All right. Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Today, I'm joined by my friend, Dr. Bret Bostwick, again, physician, scientist, and biotech leader helping turn groundbreaking genetic discoveries and technologies into new treatments for disease. Welcome to the show again, Bret.
Yeah, awesome. Great to be here, Tim. A big fan of the podcast and happy to be back.
Awesome. Well, you were one of my first, and I appreciate that. You suffered through a lot of I'm still not particularly articulate or well-spoken, but I'm getting better. And you had a lot of great content in there. So I actually went through it briefly beforehand and had three major take-homes. One was just deliberate. That was your word of the day. It was the way you sort of live your life professionally and personally, right? And that was a big part of what we talked about. But a lot of it was leadership and understanding teams, right? Particularly in dealing with specialized skill sets and individuals who may not have the EQ to match their IQ and so forth. So that was some good stuff. But also your information diet. And that's kind of what we can start there if you want to. Do you want to re-explain what that is to people?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that we talked a couple of years ago, so I could probably modify or update a few of these things. But, I think, humans evolved. I'm going back to the genetic side of me, right?
Nice.
Humans evolved in a system of quite limited information. Even a few hundred years ago, in someone's lifetime, they would have access to the amount of information in like one copy of the New York Times, right?
Right.
And now internet, social media, electronic access to everything at our fingertips, you can basically put a fire hose to your mouth and just throw in as much information as you want. But I come from the school of thought, and I know others do as well, that like some of the most impactful analysis of information comes from that time in between where you have a chance to digest it. So
Right.
I think of information diet just like eating, right? Eating all the time would not be a great idea. A few meals a day. So you mentioned this word intentional or deliberate, and I suppose these days agency is probably the more popular word. The ability to kind of be very thoughtful around how you choose to spend your time. And I continue to try to find the highest quality information, and then take it in small bite-sized pieces, leaving a lot of time in between to think about it or contemplate. Whether that's reading traditional books or textbooks or listening to podcasts or whatever, short form or long form. That's my way. And with published literature, I'm the same way. I like to read a paper in full from beginning to end and just digest it. And that means I consume probably less research publications than a lot of other folks, but it's just the way I like to do it.
Sure, but you get a deeper understanding of it, which is paramount, really. And I really like your processing time, right? Setting that aside to really, because we have some of our best ideas in the shower or when we're hiking or something else, when our brain is working through the stuff that we've been feeding it. So for a reason, right? We need some time to put it in the right, and I don't know if it's defrag our brain, but it's, you know what I mean? It's to sort things into the proper priority in place.
I mean, I'm a big, now as a parent too, I'm a big fan of like intentional boredom.
Yes.
Creating enough space and allowing attention to wane to an extent that your mind can wander a little bit. I think it's really good for kids who, these days, like kids are, some parents try to, think their job is to make sure their kids are never bored. And I guess I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum where I want intentional periods where they can get bored and have to kind of be creative and figure out how to fill their time. But same way, I mean, yes, I used to be sitting on a sailboat or going for a hike or whatever. And that time to digest, I think, is a privilege. So, I love doing that.
Excellent. Yes. And that's something I've been rediscovering again lately too is I believe that curiosity is the muscle of success, and in life and in work, and boredom is part of how you grow that muscle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Again, what are you doing with your kids? I mean, I gave my kids all sorts of new stuff. I gave them new information and new experiences and stuff, and we would play and use our imagination, right? And I think Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. But what are you doing with your kids? Because during those developmental years, those pivotal years, formative years, they really lay the foundation for for their curiosity and their personalities and stuff. But and then they get into the teen years, right? And the phone and it all. Oh man, it can be another set of formative years that can really impair they're never bored if they don't want to be, right? And so
Yeah.
what are you doing with your kids, and remind me how old they are right now?
Yeah. I mean, so I don't have that problem quite yet, Tim. Mine are 9 and 11.
Okay.
So my oldest is 11. And, you'll probably recall that when they were 6 and 8 years old, my wife and I made the decision to move on to a sailboat to spend a couple years with them in that environment. And we lived on a catamaran for 2 years, mostly in the Bahamas and the Caribbean and East Coast of the US. And that was an intentional decision based on two factors. One was we just wanted to spend more time together as a family. And then the second was I was realizing from talking to people who have teenagers that once your kids are teenagers, they might not want to spend that much time with you. So,
Right.
we were like, hey, our kids actually like us right now. And we had the privilege to be able to go on that
Right.
adventure. So we
That's
spent a couple years on the boat, and you're
that's where you were
together.
during our last podcast.
Yeah, I think that's right. I was down in the hall, yeah, doing the podcast. So that was a real unique opportunity where, we actually kept fairly busy on the boat because of like boat maintenance and things to do, but it was, also somewhat intellectually quiet, which was, I think, good. And we homeschooled the boys during that time, or we called it boat school. Um, and now that we've moved back to land, we're still on summer schedule here. We're just about to start the school year, but yeah, they do their same kind of boat school in the morning, and then they have their afternoons free. And I don't have any special secret or anything to parenting. I don't know that I'm any better than anyone else who spends a lot of time just trying to figure out how to maximize it. But I agree with you that allowing kids to follow their natural curiosity and go down these rabbit holes, I think is a useful skill that we should foster in kids. And I think it's actually useful to carry on to adulthood. I mean, I'm sometimes the happiest I am, is when I just start reading about something that's completely new to me, and then I try to go from 0 to 100 on and dive down a rabbit hole over several days. It's just a blast to learn about a new area.
Yeah. All right. Nerds unite. I love it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. We met nerding out on genetics, but that was just the first rabbit hole, right?
yep. Yeah. A lot of great stuff. Before we dive into the genetics and so forth, I would like to just sort of double click on the nature of phones and kids. Your kids don't have smartphones. I think you turned yours back into a dumb phone.
Yeah. I mean, I think that doom scrolling is probably real, and it's called doom scrolling for a reason. You know, I've experienced it. I think that the kind of attention spans that platforms like Instagram and YouTube Shorts and some of these, the kind of attention span it trains your mind to have, it's not the long form of storytelling that sometimes you kind of derive larger moral principles from, or that we evolved to sitting around a campfire hearing stories. It's a very truncated version that I think builds a muscle memory that may be a 17-second cycle or whatever the latest is. I don't know that that's that helpful.
Right.
So when we do, use screens as a family, we try to, not all screen time's equal, but we try to, if it's a movie that we're all enjoying together, that's a long form story where there's a larger arc and narrative. But yeah, to sit and kind of like click, 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 flip, left, right every 10 seconds or something. I just don't see that as a lot of value add.
Right.
So no, my kids don't have smartphones.
Are you familiar with Jonathan Haidt's work?
No, I don't think so.
He's great. He's a social psychologist. He's got a few really good books. The Righteous Mind is a really good one. It's about the liberal and conservative mindsets, right? And how really smart people can not agree on politics and religion and things.
Yeah.
But his more recent book that he's been sort of championing is The Anxious Generation, and all the data and science behind phones and all this. And he's kind of big push for what they did in Australia and limiting and social for different age groups. But also one thing he said was it's really easy if all the other kids don't have smartphones. But if some do and some don't, that's when it's really hard. And so you need to coordinate with parents and friend groups, and right, and set a time and age for certain apps or for certain devices and stuff. And that's kind of the real trick right now. And I was wondering where you were with that. I mean, your kids don't have smartphones, but there was a couple kids when my kids were in school, and those kids got left out on some things.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think you're right. It takes a village. This is something that's hard to parent as an individual. We believe quite a bit, and it takes a village as a parenting concept anyway. Surround your children by the kind of people who you think are good role models and will, enrich and teach them. So as we looked at different schools, how the school uses technology and what their cell phone policies are were big factors for my wife and I. So, that was central in how we thought about choosing the right school environment. Now, the reality is, kids still get out at whatever, 3 o'clock and grab their phone or whatever. But in between there, they have to have this kind of, face-to-face social interaction that we think is still really valuable. I should say, not all smartphone use, I think, is really bad. I mean, if FaceTime, I think, is great. It's having, basically a face-to-face conversation with another human. And, so, again, not all cell phone use created equal, but yeah, I'm looking forward to your pearls as I try to navigate this when my kids become more, probably more vocal around their requirements for cell phones or need, we'll say, as I'm sure they'll make the argument, but so far they haven't made the argument.
Okay. Well, setting expectations early is a big thing too, right? Just if they know it's not an option, they won't care about it. But if they think it might be an option, their brain won't let them. It's like a dog with a bone; they won't be able to stop trying to get it. Okay, so switching gears, I did. Some people, there's that window of opportunity. They take their kids, on an RV for a year or around the country or things. I had a friend one of my partners just did that last year, which was great. You did the sailboat thing, which I'm super jealous of. That was awesome. Do you still have your boat? You going to go do anything like that again? I remember you kind of mentioned doing, like, some people go do the Panama circuit or another things. Do you have anything on your list?
Well, we do not have the boat. We sold the boat.
Okay.
Because we moved to Colorado, and so there's, it's not anywhere close. And actually, I don't recommend people own boats like that if they're not planning on living on them full time, because really the boats are made to be used and lived on. So we had always planned to only own the boat so long as we were living on it. So no, we sold it, and I think, while there's like tremendous upsides to doing that, if you're so lucky to be able to have the chance, there's also, there's a right stage in life to do it. And so, some of the downsides, right, is, your kids don't have as much social interaction with other kids. They're just the other ones on the boats nearby. There's no organized soccer or organized athletics. So you have to find a way to replicate being part of a team. And while you can do this with like a bunch of adults in a scavenger hunt on a beach or something, it's different. It's not peer level team dynamics. And then long-term friendships. What's great about boat life is kids learn very quickly, and adults, how to make new friendships because you're showing up at a new place every couple of weeks. But then how to sustain and maintain and nurture like a longer term relationship is not something boat life teaches well. So, we made the decision, and we had always thought this, that when our kids approached middle school age, that we thought that going back to land life and having a more like traditional school experience where they could have friends and participate in organized sports and that type of environment was going to be something that they would want. And sure enough, like my 11-year-old in the second year on the boat kind of said, in reflecting, like, yeah, I love all this cool stuff we do on the boat, but I'd also really like to have friends for long term, longer than every 2 weeks
Sure.
or whatever.
Well,
So
you did say some of them you would meet up at different places, right? And there was some structure, particularly in the families, and you met a lot of really interesting, fun people.
yeah, we did, and I'm still friends with a lot of them. And we just had a boat couple at our house last week, and then a couple weeks before that, we had another one. So yeah,
Right?
they keep we keep circling in the same way. But yeah, but I mean, it's a small community that in boat life, it's a much smaller community, and compared to like now Cole's part of a soccer league that has dozens of teams and different levels, and there's a lot of organization around it, and that also I think is a valuable experience for kids. So
For sure.
yeah, yeah.
For sure. Okay, just before we get into the genetics and biotech and everything, you scratched that itch pretty good for a year. Are you gonna get another boat or go on another trip and do something at some point still?
Well, my wife and I still love sailing. And it used to be the limitation of sailing was you lost connection, but now with Starlink, that's not true. You can be anywhere on the planet and have. I joke we had better internet access on our boat in the middle of the ocean than sometimes we do here in Denver. So I think the we still love that lifestyle. So I wouldn't be surprised if we go back to it, but it'll probably be later in life. Now we're kind of enjoying the parent thing,
Okay.
enjoying watching our kids turn into young adults, and I
Right.
think we'll enjoy that process and being involved in the school here. And we were on the boat for 2 years, and that seemed just right to us. We did 2 full seasons, but I wouldn't be surprised if when we were when our kids go off to college, if we ended up back on a boat somewhere.
Okay. Well, yeah, you're very familiar with it. It would be pretty easy to even do like a quarter or half a year, right?
Yeah, I guess a lot of people try to like blend a lot of opportunity and opportunity costs by doing bite-sized pieces of a lot of small things. And I'm more of a chapter person. So
Okay.
we that chapter was something we had talked about for a couple of years. We had that chapter, it lasted 2 years, and now we're in a new chapter. And sometimes I think that trying to blend in those other things can either add or detract from the chapter you're in. So yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised if we end up choosing in the future, but I don't think we have any particular plans. And that would
Okay.
be like 10 years from now. And I'm not really sure what
Right.
the world looks like in 10 years.
Sure.
So
Fair enough. Fair enough.
yeah.
I would say on the parenting front that travel with the kids has always been awesome, right? It's a way to get away. They unplug all that stuff, and we get to go adventure together, and we do that regularly still. Our last one, I mean, what was it? Last summer we hiked across the UK, right? And
Yeah. I remember you
that
telling
was
me
really
about
great.
that.
Yeah,
That's
it was things
awesome.
like
Yeah.
yeah, it was a lot of good stuff. Anyway, okay, so now talking shop a little bit more. You trained and practiced in medical genetics, and you initially, well, what drew you to that in the first place, and then how did you transition into more biotechnology and drug development?
Yeah. I mean, wow. I think like year 2000, right? The Human Genome Project. I think that most geneticists like go back to this moment, but I remember it vividly. It was a big deal. They had the first copy of the human genome. It wasn't complete at the time, but it was like I remember at the same time I had been fascinated by scale, just like the scale of the universe, the scale of the microscopic world, and how many logarithms are between the size of a cell versus like the Milky Way galaxy. And I like
Right.
thinking about that. And the human genome came out, and it was, I think at the time, 3.2 gigabases. So that'd be 3.2 billion letters. And I remember going through the exercise of looking at my, public library at the time, which was kind of your average public library, like 15,000 books at like 60,000 words per book. And the average word is like 5.2 letters or whatever. I mean, what do you get to? You get to like 3.2 billion, right? So the average public library has like the amount of information that one cell in your body has. And then of course there's trillions of cells in your body. So it kind of like it was a realization about like the information density. Like I always thought, there was so much, like a library was so full of information, but then like density relative to spatial was just so impressive. And it also felt like in 2000, that we were about to have all the answers, right? Because like if you could understand the code and read it, then we could like, you know, uh, de-encrypt it and modify it and everything else, right? And of
Yeah,
course,
it all
we
comes
all
down
know
to
that. Yeah,
information.
yeah, I mean, I think we all know, right, that period of time probably yielded more questions as good scientific progress does.
Right.
But I was hooked. So I was hooked then, and I mean, I went into undergrad with the intention, as you know. I think we published my first published paper was with you. I think what 2006 or so. And so I loved it, you know, and then obviously you can study genetics and everything from yeast to fruit flies to mice to rats to whatever model organism you want. But I also thought the application layer in humans was going to be the part that I thought was going to be the most interesting application layer. So I went to medical school and then I went and, you know, did medical genetics. But yeah, that first bit of interest was actually more around information density and this idea that we have a recipe book and kind of the awe of that. And I would say
Right.
after all these years, you know, now that I don't think I've lost that really, I see parallels in what's happening in AI right
Right.
now. And, you know, equally interested still in what are primarily like information sciences or like digital sciences with bits and bases and
Yeah.
that can be understand on gigabase level. So yeah,
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
still hooked.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed. Same here. I really enjoyed a book. He's a surgeon here in town, Kishore Tipraneni. He wrote a series of books, sci-fi books, and one of them, the first one was, oh shoot, oh, now I'm spacing it. Anyway, I'm gonna have to share that with you later. Kishore Tipraneni. It's basically alien life connected, right, through signal, and they just basically send the information to create one of them here, right? Versus you can just sequence their DNA and boom,
Yeah,
grow them in a
yeah,
lab, and now you can move and you could upload consciousness to that, and that creature can walk around and things like that. So that was one of the
yeah,
premises. There's some neat, fun things throughout it. I'm forgetting that name. It's going to drive you crazy. Anyway,
yeah,
it was that same still awe and just the nature of how powerful, right, information and technology and how
yeah.
small it is. Anyway,
And I don't think we're that. I mean, I don't think we're that far away on the grand scheme of things from like synthetic biology and being able to synthesize all those bases. So it'll be interesting, you know, when the first organism is beamed somewhere. It'll probably be a very small, you know, bacteriophage or yeast or something, but it'll, you know, presumably could be beamed by laser and then synthesized. And it'd probably be like the first creation of life, you know, at a distance that was digital first and biologic second. And I bet that milestone's closer than we all think.
right, right. I had to look it up. It's New Eden is the name of
Okay,
that book.
there you go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I knew it was
Now
going to bother you, so
yeah,
I was
now I
trying to
can
look
sleep.
briefly myself too. Yeah,
But yeah, he's great. And I want to get him on the show. Actually, I think he'd be a great person to have on the show too.
yeah,
But do we belong in space? That's where I'm like, robots belong in space, right? Digital things belong in space. It'd be a lot easier, right? I'm not sure we belong in the cold vacuum
yeah. Well,
darkness.
we certainly didn't evolve for it, right? But like,
Right.
we also probably, you know, didn't belong in winter. You know, when we migrated north and south.
True. The
So
ice ages took a toll for sure.
yeah, I mean, back then evolution was happening on biological timescales, and you can imagine in the future that evolution will be more directed, right?
Right.
I don't know that like the species of Homo sapien, you know, 1,000 years from now will really be the same species.
Yeah.
And if it
Well,
changes, it probably won't be genetic drift or natural selection, right? It'll be us augmenting our own genomes.
that's probably already happening. So yes,
Yeah.
eugenics is back apparently. But to the sort of the earlier part of the podcast, to your point, we're still operating on a 10,000-year-old operating system, right? Our genetics, our
Yeah.
brain, and technology is going faster than we are at this point, and we're capped in a few ways. And it's no longer information. Like you said, we have our phones. It's more about how to process it and how well can we do that. And we're starting to splice out diseases in people. That's genetic editing. That's the type of evolution.
Yeah. I mean, it's really incredible. There's this concept of what got you here won't get you there. And I feel like we're at that, right? Right at that, we're right at the cusp of what kind of we were designed to do. And I think we're going to see, AI has it's been so interesting to watch over the last 5 years, right? I think we talked about it a bit last time, but it's now
It's
like
changed a lot in 2 years.
fully in its like adoption phase, right? AI is no longer these like little pilot projects or a few people are using it in a corner. It's like the full on experiment is happening globally, and it's entering all workflows across, the entire GDP, and it's here. So there's a massive natural experiment ongoing. And on the one hand, while I think that can be a bit scary because we just don't know what's going to happen, it's like a hell of a thing to have a front row seat to. I mean, we kind of live in this incredible time. Like,
Yeah.
and sometimes I kind of just think to myself, like, if you were at a movie theater and like you put like 13 billion years ago, you have a big bang, and then it takes however long till we know the first intelligence came up, which was basically us, or at least the first intelligence that could like contemplate its place in the universe, would be this like little blip of light. And now that intelligence has for the first time created another form of intelligence that's digital. And that's such a unique time point to have like straddled in our lifetime, and to see what's about to happen.
Sure.
It's got to be the best part of that movie. So yeah, I feel really lucky to be around for it. And I'm sure future generations will be great too, but I think this one, like, we're really doing something very novel as a human,
sure.
as a species. Yeah.
For sure. That you reminded me in one of my group chats, when people are dropping technology, bombs, and this just came out, a recurring little graphic image or a GIF or whatever it is somebody just eating popcorn watching.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Like in the front row. It's just like, oh, wow. What?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to think like we understand pretty well, like as a at least going back to nerdy genetic stuff and science and biology, but, a lion is like physically superior to us in any way. Like any one of us one-on-one with a lion, like we don't stand a chance, right? And there are many species on the planet, right, that are physically better suited, but what really separates us is like our intelligence, and then as an extension, ability to use tools and ability to work together. Like, we understand that the reason we're the number one species on the planet is our superior intelligence. And then we've like willingly gone and created a form of intelligence that most of us acknowledge will surpass us.
Right.
And we've all done so, on the same, on the one hand, we say like, wow, this could end really, really bad. So let's hurry up and race to it, and it kind of shows both like the fragility of us, and our way of social decision making as a species. It's been fun.
Sure. And scary and terrifying.
Yeah.
At the same time.
No, all the
Like a
above.
roller coaster,
it's all
right?
the above. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why you almost have to depersonalize it and pretend you're watching a movie. But the reality is you're like in the movie, right?
Yeah.
But it's easier to intellectualize it. Just say, no, I'm just sitting in the front row and like I can turn off the screen. But you can't, of course. Yeah.
That's a problem for future me.
Yeah. I mean, I talk to a lot of people about AI, and I think, there's two camps. Like, there's people who kind of blow it off because they think it's just like a tool. But, I work with it every day, and it's definitely not a tool. It's something completely different. Yeah.
It is. So, yeah. On the social front, before we get back into biotech, it is concerning. People, do you talk to your AI? I do regularly.
Yeah, I mean, I do. Yeah, regularly. Just it's efficient. I get my morning news, and then if I want to double click on anything, that's all vocal. And
Yep.
there's no other option in the shower. Like, can't bring a screen in. So yeah, and then talk to it. Controls workflows on my desktop. Whatever I'm up to.
Yep, your executive assistant. Um, it's really responsive. It's really positive. It's really helpful. It's ruining people for actual human to human interaction. And these kids are coming up, right? The
Yeah.
some girl last year in Japan married her AI boyfriend, supposedly. I don't know who oversaw that ceremony, but you get the idea, right? Is it's a serious concern for me, right? When people are sometimes hard enough to deal with. We get spoiled with AI, right? Who pretends to like us and who pretends to, right? And is always helpful, always there, doesn't ghost us, right? And things like
Yeah.
that.
Uh,
Uh, it's that's another level of concern I have is just the social impact. And we thought, oh well, they'll never be as good at being human. That's the one thing we can do. And it turns out, nope. It turns out they're better at being human if you tell it what to do. They did therapy studies and other stuff, and people got
yeah.
better results with AI and so forth. They're more open with it. They're more honest, and they were afraid of us being judged. But also, it was just really good at reading faces and tells and other stuff. And we're really good at that too. But it was just, and it's still in its infancy, which is just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, all the ways that we think we differentiate are slowly being eroded.
Mhm.
Um, but in some ways, large language models are being trained to be more and more human-like, right? That's a
Right?
human
Yeah.
decision to train them in that direction.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, there's I think companies out there like Replica or whatever that are specifically LLMs for companionship are just going right at that. And then the other Anthropics and OpenAI, we don't understand how the Chat GPTs of this world, how many users are using it with that intent because we don't
Right.
have the data is not released. But yeah, I tend to try to define a persona when I use it that way. Like I'll say, all right, I'm trying to pressure test an idea. I want you to play devil's advocate. I want you to argue with me in such a way that it either reinforces my ideas or corrects
Right.
them. And so I give it a little context window. But I think yeah, if your context is, hey, I'm lonely or whatever, right? That's a context
Right.
too. And so I think yeah, and it's here, just like in many other technologies. Before we decided whether it was a good idea to have that in our lives, it appeared, and now we kind of wrestle with the consequences.
Right. And the framing, the context of it is it's very similar to talking to people. Actually, I find prompting is kind of intuitive. But my friend Adam, he had to retrain his chat again because sometimes it gets you can tell it to be critical of you and so forth and to be and then it seems to slip back to it sometimes still it's just so the thing he said I want to make a panda farm in Uganda and it's like great idea and it's like he's like no it's a terrible idea. You need to call it out, so it's
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think like publicly available, the big frontier LLMs are for a general mass audience. And then obviously now people can have their own LLM standalone on their solo stations and they get to know you a lot better over time. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I think that, right now we've built the big brain. This is true of, I think, anywhere in AI where it's being applied. Let's just say like a hospital. Like we don't need the brain to be any bigger right now in the LLM. We just need the nervous system that like distributes that intelligence throughout the actual physical infrastructure. And so a lot of us just talk about, okay, now we're on 5.7 and what's better than 5.6 or 5. But at this point, like the brain's sufficiently large to be absolutely transformative and revolutionary across so many sectors, whether you think about work or life or whatever, but the nervous system still needs to grow. And so I think it's all about that adoption phase of the last mile problem, right? Like using Amazon deliveries as the example. That last mile makes a huge difference here. So I'm excited to see what all those solutions. And I think there's going to be great companies that spawn trying to fix that last mile problem.
right. Okay. So you've worked across academic medicine, clinical research, drug discovery, translational science. Where do you believe you've been able to make the greatest impact?
Oh, well, probably in part defines how you think about impact. Right now, I spend a lot of my time in venture capital where I get to be part of teams that decide where capital is deployed. So
Okay.
what kind of problems? So we spend a lot of time trying to understand where the biggest problems exist today, and then what companies are articulating the most elegant solution to that problem, and then what teams warrant that capital investment to
Right.
go after that solution. And I think while the impact is always delayed and a bit less clear because you're not like right at bedside, in many ways those are probably higher impact decisions in the long run because in some ways you're either funding an experiment to be done or you aren't, and that experiment does not get done. And so I enjoy that role a lot, and that's where I spend most of my time now, looking at companies, looking at the intersections between really challenging areas in the economy, and trying to find the talent out there and make sure that they're backed by the dollars to be able to execute.
Okay. You still have different roles like CMO in certain companies or other endeavors?
Yep. Yeah, I do. I still do that as more of like a fractional or interim, come in and more around advisory or advising on strategic direction. But increasingly, while I think actually like drug development, for example, there's a lot of people who can do great drug development, but when you're really on the cutting edge for new ideas, it's the business model or the revenue model that doesn't exist yet. So how do you take a great idea? You have a problem everyone agrees on. Okay, this is a big problem. You have a solution which looks brilliant,
Hmm.
whether it's a product or service. But
Right.
then what is the new revenue model, or how do you actually turn that into a business? So I actually found myself spending more time problem solving that than I do like the nuts and bolts of old drug development. I still do a lot of drug development thinking, but increasingly it's paired with the business side.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. I recall a little bit of something. Were you using RNAi interference tech for some things? Is that
Yeah, yeah.
just a
I mean,
small subset or?
I was at Alnylam Pharmaceuticals for 5 years.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I was part of the team that delivered like the first siRNA, which we call RNAi, RNA interference. We delivered the first siRNA to the human brain.
Okay.
Um,
For listeners outside of biotech, can you quickly explain
yeah,
what
yeah,
that is and
yeah.
why it's a
So,
powerful tool?
yeah, so, we talked about this recipe book earlier, the DNA, but then that DNA generally encodes RNA. And then RNA encodes the building blocks that you need in your body, like the proteins and the other components. And so there was a tool discovered around 1998 that allows you to turn off or degrade an RNA. And by doing so, you're essentially turning off the gene, but you're doing it in a reversible fashion. So if you stop taking the medicine, the gene will continue to make RNA and will turn back on. And so that general category we call RNAi or RNA interference. And so it took from 1998 to 20 years basically before we had the ability to deliver those molecules into humans and into the cell type we were trying to. The first successes occurred in the liver because it was easier to deliver to the liver. And then,
Well, the body
I came,
naturally puts everything there.
yeah, yeah. And there were a number of great successes with molecules of this class. But I think the more important and maybe larger paradigm than nerding out on the, nucleic acid structure or whatever, is that these were kind of what I think of as the first like fully programmable therapeutics. So this is not a class of drugs that you like go to Easter Island and lick on plants and you discover,
Yeah.
right? This
No,
is
it
not
was
it.
custom design. Yeah.
You intentionally design it. So you basically look at the human genome, you figure out the gene you want to turn off, you read the sequence of that gene, and then you put it into one of these double-stranded siRNA structures, and then you make it into a drug-like molecule so you can give it to patients. But you fully program it. And because Watson-Crick base pairing is like one of the most highly specific chemical interactions that we know of in biology, these drugs can be incredibly specific. like 1,000,000 to 1, on target to their particular target or something like this. And so it kind of unlocked a new category of like highly precise therapeutics.
Right.
This work was not done by me, by the way. This was obviously done by many others, but I had the opportunity to
You
come
helped
in.
develop it, right?
Yeah, I had the chance to come in during a period at Alnylam Pharmaceuticals where the first one of these kinds of drugs was getting FDA approved. When I came in, we had 5 FDA approvals in 5 years as a company, which was just incredible to be around to see that A to Z development process. And then the project I worked on was bringing the first one of these to the human brain. So instead of delivering it to the liver, we delivered it to the human brain.
Well, that's a whole another
Yeah.
challenge, because the brain historically is one of the most difficult organs to reach with therapeutics. So can you talk a little bit about what makes neurological drug development extra challenging?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, I think the brain is probably the least understood organ medically.
Yep.
Certainly, like the heart, we understand quite a bit about how it works, and the kidneys and the liver, but the brain has a lot of fundamental biological processes we don't understand. And so the way we delivered to the brain was the way any like 5-year-old would say to do it, which was directly injecting. But instead of
Right.
directly injecting into the brain, we injected in the lumbar spine, your lower
Right.
back, and then there's
Into
fluid
the
that goes up
CSF,
and
right?
around. Yeah, cerebral spinal fluid. And that fluid goes up and bathes the brain. And then we added on to our molecules these things that make them permeate through the cells easier. So they're able to penetrate deep into the brain. And so that's the way we delivered. And still in medicine today, like most drugs that are delivered to the brain that can't cross the blood-brain barrier, they go in intrathecally or intracisterna magna in your neck. But in the last couple years, there's been a lot of progress on ways to cross the blood-brain barrier, this thing that stops most molecules that are IV from getting to your brain. And so I think in the next couple years, we're going to see major breakthroughs in being able to deliver other classes of drugs to the brain.
Okay, very exciting stuff. I could do a week of episodes on this stuff with you.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I love neuro because I think it still has some of the highest unmet need.
yes.
People often talk about heart health and heart attack, but if you look at the impact of something like Alzheimer's disease, which
Mhm.
not only makes it harder to have executive function and get dressed and brush your teeth, but it's also one of those diseases that like erodes at who you are and your identity. And it's hard to meet someone who hasn't experienced that, but the effect that has on a family, on a society, on the healthcare system as a whole. I mean, this is one of these that you can measure the impact of Alzheimer's disease on the gross domestic product of the United States, right? So these are really high impact diseases, and we have very few tools to get at them. So I'm very excited for a time when we can drug neurodegeneration as a category in the same way that we go after the heart or high blood pressure or high cholesterol, with very precise, easy drugs that are easy to administer, and we can really move the needle on these things.
Right. Right. Well, and so transitioning, you stopped practicing as a physician clinically. That is years ago. This is you have broader impact doing it this way. Do you miss that at all?
Well, I technically still like practice. I occasionally see patients,
Really?
write
Okay.
an occasional prescription. Very rare. It's usually just some families that I diagnose that have rare enough diseases that it's hard for other doctors to maybe pick up their
Okay.
care as much.
I've
So
sent, I've
no,
sent, I've had people reach out to me from your podcast
yeah,
before to connect with
yes.
you.
Yeah, but I don't really take on new patients
Right.
anymore. And yeah, but I still have an active medical license and active board
Okay.
certifications. And,
And you have a great
um,
network.
and I think I spend a lot of time thinking about ultra rare disease still, because I think it's those really rare phenotypes that we can learn larger principles about,
Right.
drug development or disease. So yeah, I still enjoy that part.
Okay. Excellent.
So
Excellent.
maybe I missed the second part of your question. I heard to not practice anymore, but
Well, no, just the greater scope on which you work now, right, has impacted different, on a much broader you're not just a, individual scope or your community, but this is global, really. These are big problems and issues you're able to work on.
Yeah, I think as I've gotten further in my career, like the impact gets larger, but the distance you are from the person you're helping gets greater. I remember when I was like first starting as a pediatrician, and like you give a inhaler to a kid with asthma who can't breathe, and in like 1 minute, you're like, your godlike power, and you feel the
Yep.
instant, you feel great. Your wife probably knows things about this, but then as you go on and on, like, yeah, now the cycle of benefit is things like years, or even decades on some of the projects I work on. So yeah, the instant gratification's gone, but you have to keep your eye on the bigger impact.
Okay. Bret, looking forward, what are you personally trying to learn or build or experience in the next chapter?
I feel like there's so much. Very interested where two areas that are accelerating exponentially overlap,
Hmm.
and what lies at the intersection.
Sure. I
So
think a lot
like,
about that for Elon and SpaceX and robots and stuff like that, and how that, those types of Tesla and SpaceX overlap, or his data center work and all that stuff.
yeah,
Where's your head at?
yeah, I mean, right, all of those, but I don't think about rockets that much, but if you think about like, so if you could sequence the human genome for $5, and then the sequencing cost became trivial, like what other applications unlock? And then you say, well, now I have gigabases of data, but you combine that with AI, which is exponentially being able to master information sciences
Hmm.
um, like genomics. And so then what lies at that when those two technologies continue to accelerate, it's very hard for human intuition to accelerate faster than Moore's law, right, in our heads. But
Right.
when that happens, like what will be born at that intersection? And then obviously I think about it from a company perspective. I still spend a lot of time thinking about information density, which I was touching on earlier, but I think about it in medicine. So for example, like we get an EKG done of our heart, let's say, and so they've got these little squiggly lines, but we mostly do that in medicine to look at those squiggles to see if you're having a heart attack, right? Or
Yep.
to see if you
Yep.
have an arrhythmia. But what
Yep.
else can you learn from those squiggles? So like, with AI, humans can't do this very well, but with AI, we can actually see structural heart disease. So we can see if you have a valve that's not working well, or if your
Would that
heart is swollen and you have hypertrophic
okay?
cardiomyopathy. So like we recently backed a company that is using AI to reread EKGs. These EKGs are being done anyway in the health
Right.
system.
The data is everywhere.
Yeah. Same idea for like mammography, right? Like 40 million women get a mammogram every year, or they're supposed to in the United States. Probably 80 million are supposed to, and 40 million get it. But all a radiologist is looking for is just that they're looking for breast cancer. But
Hmm.
actually, in a mammogram, you can occasionally find these little arterioles that are calcified. And the reason they're calcified is because they have a inflammatory vascular process going on. And when it's
Hmm.
happening in breast tissue, it's probably also happening in their heart and in the coronary arteries. So this is called breast arterial calcification, for example. But like we don't look at this as we should be in medicine. We
Right.
just think, okay, the mammogram is a screen for breast cancer. But once you have that, you have information density. There's other information there that
Yeah.
previously it would be too hard to have humans look through all of these for these findings. But now that you have access to things like AI, these become things you can find. So I
For
think a
sure.
lot, and I just gave two medical imaging examples, but it's also
Yeah.
true of electronic health records and labs and everything else. So
For
I like
sure.
to think about where we can exploit information science in medicine, in order to learn new things and make medicine more personalized for people.
For sure, for sure, and just even the knowledge we already have. Whenever people take two different fields together, right? They see a lot of things that we haven't had time. We haven't had enough people or brain power to examine yet. So, um, all sorts of. I'm excited. I'm hoping that AI's math prowess can solve the power of the weak force and some other things that we can actually solve the energy crisis and things like that would be probably the biggest thing I think it could do in the upcoming decade.
It's one of the few things, right, it hasn't really done yet is discovery or creativity in the physical sciences. Like I think that would be the thing that when it happens, people would say, whoa, because an Albert Einstein or a Newton or whatever only come around once every so often. So if there's a fundamental advancement in our understanding of physics, because there's such a math base to that science, I think that will convince a lot of people that of where things are headed. It'll be an important red flag when it happens, and hopefully it's a kind of discovery that's useful to humanity.
Right. I was going to also mention before we sign off here, Peter Diamandis's newsletters. I like to read those once in a while, and he had a recent one about training AI and how important it is, and how we get an opportunity to write the story, and how important it is to do it ethically and to train it properly. Because there was I think it was Claude or Anthropic had the blackmailing situation. It was kind of weird, but they poked it in all sorts of different ways. And then, because if you train it on the Matrix and Terminator and it just common stuff like that, it's like, yeah, I'm supposed to blackmail or stay alive no matter what cost and all this stuff. And so how important it is. You mentioned earlier, people have their own LLMs and are training them and stuff. That's powerful and scary.
Yeah. I think, right, increasingly, there's pre-training and post-training. We don't have to nerd out on all details, but I think from a big picture, LLMs are now being primarily trained by LLMs. The outputs of LLMs are being used as the pre-training material for LLMs. So it's becoming pretty circular. And that's because, we already kind of consumed the internet, and then we got all the old written books and we scanned all the pages. And now we try to get more real world data from cars on cameras or cameras on glasses or cameras on cars or cameras on glasses or whatever about the physical world. But yeah, the next, it's a big data problem. And so the next layers are more and more, those stories don't surprise me in the same way that if you had millions of examples of human actions, you'd find some doing blackmail or some doing whatever, right? It's there's a decision making that's happening there, and there's a set of principles that are being learned and relearned and revamped. And obviously we have a responsibility in training to make sure that we're trying to do that in as thoughtful of a way as possible. But it's also almost impossible to be completely proactive on where we're headed. So it's buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy road.
Yeah, and grab your popcorn.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to dissociate and watch it as as somebody else. Sometimes.
Yeah, just pretend it's not happening to me.
That's right, Bret. Anything else you wanna mention? Anything coming up? Anything fun?
No, I think these are always fun conversations, and I'm always happy to go wherever it goes. And
awesome.
I do venture capital now quite a bit of my time. So if you're listening to this and you're, if you have an idea for a new drug, you're starting a new biotech company, or you're thinking about applications of AI in healthcare, you can go on, look up Briar Capital and check out our thesis on healthcare and life sciences, and reach out to me.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Bret. I do have some people on there who do things like that. The legacy EMRs, or the electronic medical records, is a tough industry to decide to change, right? To work with. So that's where I think one of the big struggles is for some people right now. But yeah, we talk more about that later. All right. Thank you very much, Bret. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. Thank you again, Dr. Bret Bostwick, for joining me today. It's been awesome.
Thanks, Tim.
Inspired by our guests? Visit PhoenixProsperityPodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.